The stars had always called to humanity, and 60 years ago, they finally answered back. Admiral Alara Vance stood on the observation deck of the unnazed Prometheus and watched the planet below transform from brown death into green life. This was the 17th world she had helped bring back from the void, and it never stopped feeling like magic. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and smiled as clouds began to form over what had once been endless desert. Somewhere down there, rivers were starting to flow for the first time in 1 billion years. Admiral, the Valith delegation has arrived, her aide announced from behind her. She turned away from the beautiful sight and straightened her uniform. It was time to play politics again, a game she had never enjoyed, but had learned to master. The Valith were the eldest of the elder races, a species that had ruled the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. They stood 3 meters tall with hard shells and clicking mandibles, and they looked at humans the way humans might look at clever dogs. Supreme Arbiter Kethvorn led the delegation into the conference room, his 4 eyes scanning everything with cold intelligence. Behind him walked 6 lesser Valith, each one decorated with the marks of ancient houses. Admiral Vance, he said, his translator turning clicks and hisses into smooth words. Another dead world brought to life by human hands. The Concord is most pleased with your work. We are happy to help, Elara replied, keeping her voice steady and her face neutral. She had learned long ago that the Valith respected strength and despised weakness. The Galactic Concord had welcomed humanity into its fold 60 years ago, right after first contact. 12 elder species, each one thousands of years more advanced than Earth, had offered humanity a deal that seemed too good to be true. Humanity had one gift that no other species possessed, the ability to terraform worlds. Something in human biology, human creativity, human stubborn refusal to accept death made them perfect for the task. They could look at a dead rock and see a garden, and more importantly, they could make that garden real in exchange for this gift. The Concord promised protection. They promised technology. They promised that humanity would have a seat at the great table where the future of the galaxy was decided. Most importantly, they promised that the worlds humanity created would belong to humanity forever. Terraform accords had been signed with great ceremony. Every species had put their mark on the document. It was meant to be sacred, unbreakable, a promise that would last until the stars themselves, burned out. Kithvorin had been there on that day, and Elara remembered his words perfectly. Your children's children shall walk these worlds freely. This we swear upon the light of dying stars. She had believed him. They all had now, standing in the conference room with the latest terraformed world spinning below them, Elara felt a small doubt creep into her heart. The Valith had been asking strange questions lately about resource allocation and efficiency improvements and temporary population adjustments. The surveys show rich mineral deposits beneath the northern continent. Kethvorin continued, pulling up a holographic map. The Concord believes it would be wasteful to cover them with human settlements. Perhaps your colonists could be directed to the southern regions instead. Elara frowned. The southern regions have less stable weather patterns. We designed the northern continent specifically for habitation. Designs can be changed, Kethvorin said, and something in his voice made her skin crawl. The Concord has many needs, Admiral. Your species has been most useful, but usefulness requires flexibility. The Accords guarantee our colonists the right to settle where they choose, Elara said firmly. We terraformed this world according to an agreed plan. Changing it now would take years. The Supreme Arbiter made a sound that might have been a laugh. The Accords are guidelines, Admiral, not chains. Surely you understand that the elder races know best how to manage galactic resources. We have been doing this for 10,000 years. Elara said nothing, but she filed his words away in her memory. Something was wrong, and she could feel it in her bones back on Earth. Humanity celebrated their success. 17 worlds now bore human life, and more were being prepared. Children grew up hearing stories about the great adventure among the stars, about the kind aliens who had welcomed humanity into their family. Ambassador David Chun worked tirelessly to strengthen human bonds with the Concord. He attended endless meetings and dinners and ceremonies. He learned the customs of 12 different species and spoke their languages with careful respect. He believed in the dream of cooperation. He believed that humanity had finally found its place in a universe that was bigger and stranger than anyone had imagined. "We are building something beautiful," he told his wife one night, watching the Earth rise outside their orbital home. "Our grandchildren will live in a galaxy without war, without hunger, without fear. The Concord has shown us the way." His wife smiled and held his hand. "You always were an optimist." "It is not optimism," he said. "It is faith." They gave us their word, but faith requires trust, and trust requires honesty. And the elder races had never been honest with humanity. They had seen the young species and calculated their value like merchants weighing gold. They had smiled and made promises. Knowing that promises cost nothing in the halls of power on 12 ancient homeworlds, decisions were being made. Humanity had served its purpose. The garden worlds were ready. Now it was time to harvest what the humans had planted. Kithilven met with the other leaders of the Concord and spoke plainly. "The humans are useful tools, but tools do not own what they build. A hammer does not claim the house. We will take what is ours, and the humans will accept it because they have no choice." The others agreed. What could humanity do against species that had ruled the stars for millennia? What could a young race barely out of its cradle accomplish against the combined might of the Concord? They did not know humanity very well. They were about to learn on the observation deck of the Prometheus. Admiral Elara Vance looked at the beautiful world she had helped create and wondered if her children would ever walk upon its surface. She did not know that in 5 years she would return to this same spot with a fleet that would make the Concord tremble, but that was still in the future. For now, there were only doubts and fears, and a terrible feeling that the dream was about to become a nightmare. The betrayal did not come with thunder and fire. It came with paperwork and polite smiles and words that twisted like snakes. It started on Verdun 7, a world that humanity had transformed from frozen waste into rolling meadows and crystal lakes. 300,000 colonists had built their homes there, raised their children, planted their gardens. The notice arrived on a Tuesday morning due to newly discovered mineral deposits of strategic importance. The Galactic Concord requires immediate evacuation of Settlement Zone Alpha. Residents will be relocated to temporary housing. This is not optional. Mayor Sarah Kim read the message 3 times before she believed it was real. "This has to be a mistake," she told her council. "We have been here for 20 years. This is our home." It was not a mistake. Avelith's ships arrived within the week, their massive hulls blocking out the sun. Soldiers in gleaming armor marched through streets where children had played just days before. They were not violent, not exactly, but they made it clear that resistance would not be tolerated. "You have 48 hours to gather your belongings," the Valith commander announced. "Take only what you can carry. Everything else now belongs to the Concord." The colonists protested. They showed the soldiers their deeds and documents and copies of the Terraform Accords. They pointed to the words that promised them these lands forever. The soldiers did not care. They had their orders on Earth. Ambassador David Chun demanded an emergency meeting with the Concord Council. He stood before the 12 elder species and spoke with barely controlled anger. "This is a violation of everything we agreed upon. The Accords clearly state that human colonies are sovereign territory. You cannot simply take them." Kethvorin leaned forward, his mandibles clicking slowly. "Ambassador, please understand the situation. The accords were written as a gesture of goodwill, not as binding law. Circumstances have changed. The Concord has needs that must be met. Needs that require you to throw families out of their homes? Temporary inconveniences for the greater good of galactic civilization. Surely humanity can understand the concept of sacrifice. Sean felt something cold settle in his chest. We trusted you, and we appreciate that trust, Kethvorin replied smoothly. Which is why we are handling this matter with such gentleness. A less patient species might have simply taken what they wanted without warning. The message was clear. Be grateful we are not worse, but the worst was yet to come. The colony's ship, Hope of Geneva, carried 4,000 souls toward Kepler 2-2b, the crown jewel of human terraforming. Families who had saved for decades, young couples dreaming of new beginnings. Children who had never known anything but the cramped corridors of Earth's orbital stations. Captain Marcus Webb guided the massive ship through the final approach, his heart full of hope. Through the viewports, passengers pressed their faces against the glass to see their new home. Green continents and blue oceans sparkled below them like a promise fulfilled. Kepler control. This is Hope of Geneva requesting landing clearance. Webb transmitted the response came not from human controllers, but from a Valith voice. Cold and mechanical. Hope of Geneva, you are entering restricted space. Reverse course immediately. Webb frowned. There must be some confusion. We have legal clearance to land. These colonists have been approved by both Earth and the Concord. Please check your records. A pause. Then, your clearance has been revoked. Kepler 2-2b is now under Valith administration. No human vessels are permitted. This is your final warning. 4,000 people listened to that transmission. Mothers held their children close. Fathers stood frozen in disbelief. This was supposed to be their home, the world they had dreamed about for years. I am not turning back, Webb said quietly to his first officer. Those people down there, our people, they need to know what is happening. We are going through. The first Valith weapon struck the Hope of Geneva at 0347 hours. It tore through the passenger decks where families slept, killing hundreds in an instant. The second shot destroyed the engines. The third split the ship in two. There were no survivors on Earth. The news hit like a physical blow. 4,000 dead, murdered in cold blood for trying to reach a world that humanity had built with their own hands. The names scrolled across every screen. Children, grandparents, teachers, doctors, Dreamers Ambassador Chun stood once again before the Concord Council. But this time he did not speak with anger. He spoke with something much more dangerous. Absolute calm. You killed 4,000 civilians, he said. 4,000 innocent people who only wanted to go home. What is your response? Kethvorin spread his claws in a gesture of regret. A tragic misunderstanding. The ship was warned to turn back. When it failed to comply, standard security protocols were followed. The Concord expresses its sympathy for your loss. Sympathy, indeed. And to prevent future tragedies, the Council has decided to clarify certain matters. After careful review, we have determined that the Terraform Accords were never intended to grant permanent ownership to humanity. The worlds you created were always Concord property. You were merely contractors, not landowners. The other 11 species nodded in agreement. Not one spoke in humanity's defense. Jun looked around that vast chamber at beings who had smiled and shaken his hand and called him friend. He saw nothing but cold calculation in their eyes. Humanity had been useful, and now humanity was in the way. You broke your word, he said. You made a promise, and you broke it without a second thought. Words are flexible things, Kethvorin replied. Surely a species as young as yours understands that survival requires adaptation. We have survived for 10,000 years by knowing when to keep promises and when to discard them. You should learn from our example." Chun was quiet for a long moment. The council watched him with mild curiosity, wondering if the human would cry or beg or threaten. They had seen young species broken before. It was almost entertaining, but David Chun did not cry or beg. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his collar, and looked directly into Kethvaren's 4 eyes. "You have made your position clear," he said, his voice steady as stone. "The promises you made mean nothing. The laws you wrote protect only yourselves. We are alone. You are beginning to understand?" "Yes," Chun said. "I am. And now I have a message for you, not just from Earth, but from every human who ever believed your lies. You have given us your terms. Humanity will now prepare ours." He turned and walked out of the chamber without looking back. Behind him, the elder races laughed. What could humans possibly do? They were children playing at civilization, and children did not make terms with gods. They did not see the look in Chun's eyes. They did not understand what they had awakened on Earth. A message went out to every human settlement in the galaxy. Come home. Close the borders. Prepare for 5 years. Humanity went silent. The elder races assumed they were licking their wounds. They assumed wrong. The silence began on a Monday morning when every human diplomat, scientist, engineer, and workers simply walked away from their posts across Concord space. They left without warning, without explanation, without anger. One moment they were there, the next they were gone. Ships that had been docked at alien stations lifted off and vanished into the void. Communication channels that had hummed with human voices went dead. The elder races watched with amusement. "They are sulking," Kethvaren told his council, "like children sent to bed without dinner. Give them a few months, and they will come crawling back, begging for scraps from our table." The other species agreed. Humanity needed the Concord far more than the Concord needed humanity. Without access to elder technology, without protection from the dangers of the galaxy, the young species would wither and die. It was only a matter of time, but the months passed, and humanity did not return. A year went by, then 2. Concord spies tried to penetrate human space, but none of them came back. Probes were launched toward human systems, but they were destroyed at the border, cut down by weapons that left no trace. Even long-range sensors showed nothing but static where human worlds should be. "They are hiding," the intelligence chiefs reported. "Building defenses, perhaps. Preparing for a siege. Let them hide," Kethvaren replied. "Let them huddle in their little corner of the galaxy. When they emerge, they will find that the universe has moved on without them." But deep in his 4 hearts, the Supreme Arbiter felt something he had not felt in centuries. A small, cold seed of doubt behind the wall of silence. Humanity was not hiding. Humanity was transforming. Director Sarah Okonkwo stood at the heart of Project Prometheus, the most ambitious scientific effort in human history. She had been given unlimited resources, unlimited authority, and a single mandate. "Never again, show me what we have," she said, walking through the vast underground complex where 10,000 of Earth's brightest minds worked day and night. Dr. James Chun, son of the ambassador, led her through corridors humming with energy. "We started by asking a simple question. How did species that had 10,000 years head start fail to develop certain technologies? The answer changed everything." He brought her to a window overlooking a massive chamber where strange lights flickered and danced. "The elder races are old, Director, but old does not mean wise. They found technologies that worked and stopped looking for anything better. They built empires on foundations laid millennia ago and never questioned whether those foundations were flawed. And we found something they missed." "We found many things," James said with a grim smile, "because we were not looking for what works. We were looking for what wins in another wing of the complex." Engineers were building ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Elara Vance supervised the construction personally. Watching the hull of the new Prometheus take shape, the old ship was a science vessel, she told her crew. This one is a message. The new Prometheus was a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that bent the laws of physics in ways the elder races thought impossible. Its engines could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. Its shields could shrug off attacks that would destroy a Valith dreadnought, but the ship was just the beginning. We cannot build enough vessels to match the Concord fleet. Vance explained to the War Council. They have thousands of ships. We will have hundreds at most. But we do not need to match them. We need to terrify them. Humanity had always been good at war. It was a talent they had tried to forget, a dark gift they had hoped to leave behind on Earth. But the Concord had taught them a valuable lesson. Mercy without strength was just another word for victim in the deepest levels of Prometheus. Scientists worked on something even more terrible. They called it the Dimmer, a device that could reach across light years and touch the heart of a star. It could not destroy a sun, not quite, but it could make a sun flicker, stutter, dim for just a moment. A moment was all they needed. This is a weapon of terror, Sarah Okonkwo said when she saw the first successful test. We are becoming monsters. No, James replied. We are becoming survivors. There is a difference. She wanted to argue, but she thought of the Hope of Geneva, of 4,000 people who had done nothing wrong except trust the wrong species. She thought of the children on Verdun 7 who had been dragged from their homes. She thought of every promise broken without consequence. Finish it, she said. Finish all of it. The fourth year passed. Human agents began to slip back into Concord space, not as diplomats, but as ghosts. They watched and listened and reported back everything they learned. The elder races were complacent, confident, certain that humanity posed no threat. They are laughing at us, one agent reported. In their councils, they joke about the day humans will come begging for mercy. They have already divided our colony worlds among themselves. Let them laugh, Vance replied. Let them divide whatever they want. When we return, we will take it all back. On the 5th year, a Valith scout fleet decided to inspect human space. 12 warships crossed the border, their commanders expecting to find a broken species waiting to surrender. They found nothing at all. No distress calls were sent. No debris was ever found. 12 ships and 6,000 crew members simply ceased to exist. Ethvorin received the report in his private chambers and felt that seed of doubt bloom into something larger. Find out what happened, he ordered. Send more ships if necessary. His advisors looked at each other nervously. Supreme Arbiter, perhaps we should wait. If something destroyed an entire fleet without leaving a trace, I said send more ships. They sent 50 vessels the second time, a force capable of conquering a planet. Contact was lost within hours of crossing the border. The Concord Council met in emergency session. For the first time in centuries, the elder races were afraid. Something was waiting in human space, something that could swallow fleets without effort. We should negotiate, one delegate suggested. Perhaps we were too harsh. Perhaps an apology. We do not apologize to lesser species. Ethvorin snapped, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. We are the masters of this galaxy. We have ruled for 10,000 years. Humans are nothing. Then why are our ships disappearing? No one had an answering the silence of human space. Admiral Elara Vance looked at her fleet and smiled. 200 ships, each one a masterpiece of desperate innovation. Behind them floated the weapons that would change the galaxy forever. They are afraid now, she told her crew. But they do not understand yet. They think we are defending ourselves. They do not know that we are preparing to attack. She thought of the world she had terraformed, the green paradise now crawling with Valith miners. She thought of Ambassador Chun, who had spent his life believing in peace and died with that belief shattered. She thought of 4,000 names carved into a memorial that waited for a home. "Send the message," she ordered. "Tell them we are coming." The message was simple, broadcast on every frequency. "The silence is over. Humanity requests an audience with the Galactic Concord. We have terms to discuss." The elder races received the message and felt something they had not felt in millennia. Genuine fear. They were right to be afraid. The human fleet emerged from the void like ghosts given form, and the galaxy held its breath. Admiral Ilara Vance stood on the bridge of the UNS Prometheus as her ship dropped out of hyperspace above the Concord capital world. Behind her came 200 vessels moving in perfect formation, their hulls black as the space between stars. "Admiral, we are being hailed on all frequencies," her communications officer reported. "The Concord demands to know our intentions." "Let them wonder a little longer," Vance replied. "Position the fleet. I want them to see exactly what they are dealing with." The Concord defense forces scrambled to respond. Thousands of ships lifted from orbital stations and formed a wall between the human fleet and the planet below. They outnumbered the humans 10 to 1, and their commanders felt confident despite the fear in their hearts. Supreme Arbiter Keth Voren watched from his palace as the human vessels took position. Even on his display screens, he could tell that something was wrong. The human ships were too large, too smooth, too strange. They did not look like anything his engineers had ever designed. "Get me Admiral Vance," he ordered. Now, the connection took only seconds. Vance appeared on his screen, her face calm and cold as winter ice. 6 years had changed her. The young officer who had once shown him terraformed worlds with pride was gone. In her place stood something harder, something that had been forged in grief and tempered by betrayal. "Supreme Arbiter," she said, "how kind of you to call. What is the meaning of this?" Keflorin demanded. "You bring warships to our capital. This is an act of aggression. The Concord will not tolerate. The Concord will be silent and listen." Vance interrupted, and her voice carried a weight that made the ancient alien pause. 6 years ago, you murdered 4,000 of my people. You stole 17 worlds that we built with our own hands. You broke every promise you ever made and laughed while you did it. Those matters were decided by the Council. Your Council is irrelevant. Your laws are irrelevant. Your 10,000 years of civilization mean nothing to me. All that matters now is what happens in the next 24 hours. Kethvorin felt his heart's beating faster. "You are threatening us?" "No," Vance said. "I am educating you. Watch your son." She nodded to her tactical officer, and somewhere in the depths of her ship, the dimmer activated. Across millions of kilometers of space, impossible energies reached out and touched the Concord homeworld star. The sun flickered it, lasted only 3 seconds. But in those 3 seconds, the temperature on the planet below dropped by 10 degrees. Power grids wavered. Automated systems screamed warnings. Billions of beings looked up at their sky and saw their star stutter like a candle in the wind. That was a demonstration. Vance said into the shocked silence, "We can do much worse. We can make your sun go dark for hours, days, weeks. We can freeze your world or boil it. We can do this to any star in your territory, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." Kefvoran's translator struggled to process his response. No species had ever threatened a Concord like this. No species had ever possessed the power to back up such threats. "What do you want?" He finally managed. Vance smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I want you to gather your council. I want every leader of every elder race watching. And then I am going to tell you exactly what humanity demands." The council assembled within the hour. 12 species, each one ancient beyond human comprehension, each one terrified in ways they had not felt since their earliest days among the stars. They watched their screens as Admiral Vance broadcast to every world in Concord. Space simultaneously. Citizens of the Galactic Concord, she began, her voice reaching trillions of beings across thousands of light years. 60 years ago, your leaders welcomed humanity into your family. They promised us protection, partnership, and a place among the stars. They signed treaties and made oaths and swore upon the light of dying stars that our children would walk free on worlds we built together. She paused, letting the words sink in. Those promises were lies. Every single one. The moment we were no longer useful, you threw us away. You stole our homes, murdered our people, and laughed at our grief. You thought we were weak because we chose to build instead of destroy. You thought we were foolish because we believed your words. Her eyes hardened. You were wrong. We did not spend 6 years crying in the dark. We spent 6 years becoming something new, something that your 10,000 years of experience never prepared you for. We took every gift you gave us and made it better. We found technologies you were too lazy to discover. We built weapons you were too arrogant to imagine. And now we have come to deliver humanity's final terms. She raised one hand and began counting. First, every human colony world will be returned to human control immediately. Every colonist who was displaced will be allowed to return. Anyone who interferes will be destroyed. Second, the Valith Dominion will pay reparations for the 4,000 lives lost aboard the Hope of Geneva. Each family will receive compensation determined by human courts. The Supreme Arbiter will personally apologize to every surviving relative. Third, the Galactic Concord in its current form will be dissolved. A new council will be created where every species, young and old, holds equal voice and equal vote. No more elder races. No more lesser species. Just people trying to live together. Keth Voren's voice crackled through the channel. These terms are impossible. The Concord will never— I am not finished, Vance said, and her tone made the Supreme Arbiter fall silent. Fourth, any species that refuses these terms will face consequences. I will not destroy your worlds. I am not a monster, whatever you may think. But I will cripple your fleets, shut down your power grids, and freeze your cities until you reconsider. We can wait. We are very patient when we need to be. She leaned forward. You have 1 solar day to accept. If you refuse, humanity will demonstrate what we are capable of. And I promise you this. You will not enjoy the lesson. The broadcast ended, and chaos erupted across the galaxy. The elder races had never been given ultimatums. They had never been forced to bend to anyone's will. Their fleets were massive, their technology advanced, their experience vast, but none of that mattered against a species that could dim. Sunsketh Voren called an emergency session of the council. The delegates screamed at each other for hours. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others insisted on fighting to the death. A few suggested assassination, though no one knew how to reach Vance through her fleet's defenses. We must test them, one admiral argued. Perhaps their weapons are limited. Perhaps they are bluffing. You want to test a species that just flickered our sun? Another shot back. Are you insane? As the debate raged, the human fleet waited in perfect silence. Vance sat in her command chair and watched the countdown timer. She felt no joy, no triumph, only a cold determination to see this through. They will fight. Her first officer said quietly, "They are too proud to surrender." "I know," Vance replied, "but we gave them a choice. That is more than they gave us." The solar day passed. No response came from the Concord. Instead, their fleet began to move, thousands of ships forming attack patterns around the human vessel's Vance nodded slowly. "So be it." She opened a channel to her fleet. "All ships prepare for combat. Remember who we are fighting for. Remember why we are here. And remember, we are not here to destroy them. We are here to make sure they never forget what happens when humanity stops asking and starts demanding. The first Concorde weapons fired, and the battle for the future of the galaxy began. The Battle of Concorde Prime lasted 11 minutes, and in those 11 minutes, the galaxy changed forever. The Valeth flagship fired first, its main cannon sending a beam of concentrated plasma toward the Unnes Prometheus. It was a shot that had destroyed 100 enemy vessels in 100 wars. A shot that should have vaporized the human ship instantly. The beam struck the Prometheus and simply vanished. Admiral Vance did not even blink. "Target their weapon systems," she ordered. "Disable, do not destroy. I want survivors." Human ships moved through the Concorde fleet like wolves among sheep. Their weapons were precise, surgical, almost gentle. They did not seek to kill, but to cripple. One by one, the great warships of the elder races fell silent, their engines dead, their weapons offline. Their crews alive, but helpless. The Concorde commanders could not understand what was happening. Their shields might as well have been paper. Their weapons might as well have been toys. Technologies that had ruled the stars for millennia were worthless against these strange human vessels. How is this possible? One captain screamed into his communicator before his ship went dark. They have only had 60 years. We have had 10,000, but that was exactly the point. The elder races had stopped learning, stopped growing, stopped questioning. They had become comfortable in their power, lazy in their dominance. Humanity had no such luxury. Humanity had been forced to innovate or die in 11 minutes. The greatest fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Concorde was reduced to drifting hulks. Not one ship was destroyed. Not one crew member was killed. But not one vessel could move or fight. Vance surveyed the wreckage and felt a strange sadness. This was what they had driven humanity to become. This was the monster that betrayal had created. Open a channel to the Supreme Arbiter. Shisaketh Voron appeared on her screen, and for the first time in his long life, he looked afraid. Truly, genuinely afraid. His mandibles trembled as he spoke. "You have made your point, Admiral. The Concorde accepts your terms." "I know you do," Vance replied. "But acceptance is not enough. You need to understand why this happened. You need to understand what you did wrong. We underestimated you. No. You broke your promises. That is what you did wrong. You gave your word and then threw it away like garbage. You looked at beings who trusted you and decided that their trust was a weakness to be exploited." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with 6 years of grief and rage. Humanity does not forget. We do not forgive easily. But we are not monsters. We will not do to you what you did to us. We will not steal your worlds or murder your children. We will not break our word, because unlike you, we understand that promises mean something. The Concorde surrendered formally within the hour. Human ships escorted the Supreme Arbiter to the planet's surface, where he was made to broadcast his capitulation to every world under his control. 3 days later, human Marines landed on the Valeth homeworld. They did not come as conquerors, but as enforcers, making sure that the terms of surrender were honored. Sergeant Major James Oduya led the team that found Keth Voron hiding in his bunker beneath the capital. The Supreme Arbiter had sealed himself behind 17 blast doors, each one designed to withstand a nuclear strike. The Marines walked through them without firing a shot. The doors simply opened as they approached, their locks disabled by technologies the Valeth could not comprehend. "How?" Keth Voron demanded as he was led into the light. "How did you do this? How did you become so powerful in just 60 years when we had 10,000? Oduya looked at the alien who had caused so much suffering, who had given the order that killed 4,000 innocent people. He felt no hatred, only a tired kind of pity. "You spent 10,000 years learning how to rule," he said. "We spent 60 years learning how to survive. We are very good at surviving. The supreme arbiter was taken to stand trial for the Hope of Geneva massacre. He was not executed. Humanity had abolished capital punishment centuries ago. Instead, he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life helping rebuild the worlds he had damaged. Working alongside the species he had looked down upon it was, many humans thought, a fitting punishment for someone who had never valued the work of others. The Galactic Concord was dissolved just as humanity demanded. In its place rose the Stellar Assembly, a new council where every species held equal voice. The young and the old sat together, voted together, argued together. It was messy and loud and sometimes frustrating, but it was Fair Admiral Alara Vance, retired from the military the day the assembly was founded. She had done what was needed, but she had never wanted to be a warrior. She had always wanted to be a builder. She returned to Kepler 22b, to the world she had helped transform from death to life. The Valith mining operations were gone, dismantled by human engineers. The forests were growing back. The rivers ran clean. A Geni memorial was built at the landing site where the Hope of Geneva should have touched down. 4,000 names were carved into black stone, each letter filled with gold. Families came from across the galaxy to touch those names and remember Vance spent her final years on that world, watching the sun rise over mountains she had helped create. She planted a garden outside her small house and grew vegetables that had no business surviving on an alien world. She wrote letters to the families of those who had died and listened to their responses one afternoon. A Valith diplomat came to visit her. He was young, too young to have been involved in the betrayal, but he carried the weight of his species' shame. He asked her the question that every alien wanted answered. Why did you not destroy us? You had the power. You could have erased my entire species from existence. Why did you show mercy? Vance looked at him for a long moment, then turned her gaze back to the garden where life was growing from soil that had once been sterile dust, because we made a promise once. She said, a promise that our children would walk these worlds freely, not as conquerors, but as neighbors. We do not break promises. That is what makes us different from what you were, even after everything my people did, especially after that. If we had become what you were, then you would have won. The betrayal would have changed us into something ugly. We refused to let that happen. She reached down and pulled a weed from her garden, tossing it aside. The universe is full of species that know how to destroy. It is much rarer to find ones that know how to build. Humanity chooses to build, even when destruction would be easier, even when revenge would feel justified, because that is who we are. The diplomat was silent for a long time. Finally, he bowed his head in the Valith gesture of deep respect. I understand, he said, and I am sorry. For all of it, sorry is a beginning, Vance replied. What you do next will determine if it means anything. Years passed. The Stellar Assembly grew stronger. Species that had once been conquered by the Concord found their voices. Technologies were shared freely. Wars became rare, then rarer still. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was better on the anniversary of the Hope of Geneva massacre. Beings from every corner of the galaxy gathered at the memorial on Kepler 22b. They stood together, young and old, former enemies and new friends, and remembered the cost of broken promises. Admiral Alara Vance died peacefully in her garden at the age of 97. Her last words were spoken to her granddaughter, who had been born on the world Vance had helped create. Remember who we are, she whispered. Remember that we build. Remember that we keep our promises. That is what makes us human. Her granddaughter promised to remember, and she kept that promise for the rest of her long life, because that is what humans do. They build. They remember, and they keep their word. The stars had called to humanity 60 years before the betrayal, and humanity had answered with hope and trust. When that trust was broken, humanity answered with strength and determination. But in the end, humanity answered the way it always had, with promises kept and a future built not on revenge, but on the stubborn, beautiful belief that tomorrow could be better than today. And in a galaxy that had forgotten what honor meant, that was the most powerful weapon of all.